4th, the year of our Lord 2026. It is 8 o'clock a.m. And folks, my computer is falling apart. Sorry, my thing is falling off the desk here. You are watching Dog Shirt TV, and it is just an unprecedented revolution in morning television. And one of the revolutionary features is that yesterday, the estimable John Hawkinson pointed out that I have not been using my soundboard much recently. And so I want to address that today in a big way. And let it not be said that I'm not responsive to people's concerns. Right. And another one of the revolutionary features is that, we continue to ignore the biggest news in the world right now. Because, some news stories are so big that there's not much you can do about it. You just have to pretend it's not happening. And no, I'm kidding. We're going to talk about Iran today. We're going to be joined by the most estimable Ari Tabatabai, who is having trouble getting on, but will be with us as soon as she is able, and will be joining us momentarily. She is trying, and I think I may have sent her the wrong link. But there will be a giant round of applause as soon as she pops up on the screen, all of which is a long-winded way of saying that we are not allowed to have fun anymore, but we are allowed to have Ari Tabatabai. I don't know if you heard, Ari, but there was audience complaints that I have not been using my soundboard enough to produce, unfortunate noises. And there was no outro music yesterday, and so we're being responsive to people's concerns. How are you this evening?
This evening, it's 9 p.m. I had a delicious meal here in Singapore, and I'm ready for 2.5 hours of Iran discussions today, starting with this one.
Right, because this is going to be the sillier one, because we're going to warn, because Ari and I are doing at 9 o'clock, for which reason we're going to break about 5 minutes early today. We're going to do rational security. So we're going to be sitting here hanging out for the next 2.5 hours talking Iran. And that is what I always try to do when I'm in Singapore and have just had a great meal. So for those of you who don't know, Singapore is actually the best food city in the world, or at least up there with a very small number of places. Where did you go? What did you eat?
I went to this delicious place called Blue something or other, can't remember. Don't ask me what I ate because I don't remember the name of any of the dishes, but they were all delicious. And it was a fantastic meal that is kind of like at the intersection of the different kind of cuisines from the different cultures that are here. So you get a little bit of everything. Yeah, that was delicious.
I would be remiss, given Lior's comment, if I didn't check in on Lior. How are you guys doing? Is everybody in shelters, or are you guys plugging on as normal? Lior says he just came back from another alarm. I was texting this morning with Liz Surkoff, who is also spending her time in and out of shelters. Um, uh, stay safe, everybody, and I would say this too shall pass, but I suspect it will escalate before it passes. So let's get into it. Ari, have we figured out yet why we're attacking Iran or what the point of all of this is, or is that still a matter of mystery?
Uh, Matter of mystery to me. I'm hoping somebody did figure it out. The additional question now seems to be whether this is a war or whether it's not a war. I've been joking that it's kind of like, the famous "This is not a pipe" painting. Ceci n'est pas une pipe. This is ceci n'est pas une war, I guess, is where we're at. So yeah, no, I don't know. The administration keeps kind of going
At
back
least
and
we haven't
forth
called it a
between.
special military operation.
That is true. We have not, but
I
we have
keep
called it large
waiting for
combat
somebody to slip
operations.
up and call it a special military operation.
It'll be over in 3 days, Ben. It'll be
Yeah.
over in 3 days. Yeah, no, the administration, as far as I can tell, is still kind of going back and forth between different objectives. And right now, the objective seems to be a little bit of everything under the sun in Iran. So, they put out the statement saying that they're going to go after the Iranian Navy. Obviously, the nuclear program has been cited, the missile program. And it's not clear to me what we're thinking in terms of the regime itself, where, one day we're doing regime change, the next we're not. So it's all clear as mud, I guess.
Um, what do we know? I mean, if the one thing that would be clear in terms of objective is if the Iranian government were to fall, that would certainly allow the administration to say, okay, all of our objectives are achieved, or at least all of the ones that we're acknowledging. Is there any further sign of instability in the regime? Usually, when you decapitate something, there's some churn as a result. What do we know about what's happening in Iran?
Well, let me start with the first part of what you said, which is that, if the regime falls, that'll presumably take care of all the other issues. I'm not actually so sure, right? I mean, if the
Well, I didn't.
regime wholesale falls, yes, if we have some sort of change within the regime, but also even if the regime falls, right, it depends what comes next. So there's that piece of it. But so it's hard to tell right now. There is this process that happens when the supreme leader dies, as he did. It's only happened once so far. This is the second time where you have this kind of, it's kind of like when the Pope is selected, where you have this body that kind of 88 clerics, they go in together and convene and kind of make a decision on who's going to be next. We don't know what that decision is going to be yet, and we were supposed to kind of learn over the weekend or this week. If I were the regime, I would not announce something immediately, since President Trump has said that we're going to keep killing people,
Right.
presumably going to keep going down the list. But there is some initial reporting indicating that the person who's favored to replace him is actually his son, who is equally bad as he was, right? It's somebody who's very corrupt, who was very close to his father, ideologically shares a lot of what his father stood for, none of which is good. So what we know so far from in terms of the transition is not good. We also have within the IRGC the individual who's who's the commander for the IRGC is somebody who's known to be very radical. So far, none of these developments are good as far as the population goes. It's a little murky. The internet connectivity has not been there really. We're not getting a ton of information. And also, this is a bit of a weird period for Iranians, right? Because there's the kind of joy and hope of some of these individuals who had their grip on power for so long no longer being there, but there's also the uncertainty of what comes next. There is also the uncertainty of what the U.S. Large-scale combat operations are going to look like. There is civilian casualties. So there's all of those things that make things a little complicated, I think. And so, yeah, I think for a lot of people, it's kind of waiting and seeing what happens next.
Yeah, so let's talk about so actually you just passingly addressed a question that came up yesterday, which when you mentioned that Khamenei Jr. is very corrupt. What does corruption mean in the Iranian context? When we talk about these clerics being corrupt, are we talking about the just routine garden variety Eastern European style kleptocracy? Are we talking about these foundations that famously have a lot of power in Iran? What do we mean when we say that young master Khamenei is corrupt relative to, say, former President Khatami or Ahmadinejad or some of these other figures within the Islamic Republic?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is access and kind of what, the foundations are definitely a part of it, right? So part of there's several things. One is that there are structures that have been created that really enable parts of the regime to benefit from, to have control over key sectors of the economy and to benefit, frankly, from sanctions. Like this has been something that has been really interesting is that and people who travel to Iran are often baffled by this and say, look, there are Ferraris driving down the street and you have these areas where people are apparently extremely rich and you would see them wearing these brands that, they would wear in Dubai. And it's very baffling to a lot of people. But actually, it's not to anybody who kind of like looks at a lot of these regimes more holistically, right? Which is that very often, a few individuals at the top end up benefiting tremendously from the sanctions structure that is put in place. If you don't have that sort of free market, right, you have a few individuals, families, companies, et cetera, groups who are able to kind of like control that flow of goods and benefit from it. So yeah, it is kind of your garden variety of autocratic systems having corruption. It's also part of it is these foundations that are supposed to be charitable foundations and organizations that are actually linked to the IRGC that benefit from again the economy being fairly closed off and who are involved in key sectors like oil and gas, for example, infrastructure, real estate, and so on and so forth. So he is perhaps not that much more corrupt than some of the top IRGC people, but he's certainly more corrupt than the vast majority of the rest of the regime.
What do we know about what the United States and Israel are targeting at this point? There are certainly missile stuff. There is leadership stuff. Can we discern anything about what we are trying to achieve by the targets that we're hitting?
Yeah, it's a little bit of all of the above. There's definitely the political sort of leadership element of it. We not only hit kind of the decision-making centers within the regime, so the supreme leaders' residence, obviously, the Supreme National Security Council, but also there is reporting that Israel specifically has been going after individuals who were part of the regime, but who have potentially had a falling out with the regime. So the former leader of the Green Movement, Mousavi, his residence was apparently targeted. Then you have the military pieces, right? So the missile program, I'll put the nuclear program in this bucket, even though the nuclear program, as of today, as far as I know, the IC has not said that Iran was actually weaponizing its program.
Right.
But let's put that in
But it was
that
2
bucket
weeks
because
away.
that's but the really key thing here, right, is that from the decision to make a nuclear weapon, but that part always gets dropped. Anyway, but then there's been conversations about also, again, I mentioned the Iranian Navy, which it's not clear to me whether we're talking about the IRGC Navy or the Iranian Navy. Those are two actually different things. And one is much more problematic than the other. But also, the other thing is that the Iranian Navy is really not like it's just not a very powerful navy. It's a pain. It does things we don't like, but it's not exactly a tool of power projection in the world. So
Right.
we're not talking about the Chinese Navy here, right? We're not talking about the PLAN. So, so we're going after specific military pieces, but it does seem like it is the target set keeps growing, both in terms of the number of things we're going after, but also in terms of the kind of scope of things we're going after. And again, to me, it just sort of indicates that we're trying to at least create the environment for regime change, if not doing said regime change ourselves.
Yeah, so talk to me about the apparent Israeli decision to go after former regime people or people who are connected with, figures in the Islamic Republic, but kind of a dissident variety, the Mousavis, the descendants of the sort of Khatami wing of the Republic. Um, I find this somewhat baffling because if you were, I don't know, if you were saying, well, who is our Delphi Rodriguez, right? Who are, if you want to cut the head off the snake, but not incinerate the entire snake, if you wanted uh, uh, to have somebody left to talk to, a group of people who are of the regime but wanted to change the regime, wanted to move it in a more modern, less oppressive, less murderous direction, doesn't strike me as a group of people that you would want. You might not ultimately invest in them, but you wouldn't want them not to exist. Um, what do we understand, if anything, about the Israeli strategy here?
Yeah, and it's interesting because President Trump, I think it was yesterday, was asked not this precise question, but a question that kind of led him to start kind of talking a little bit to this point. And he said something to the effect of, "Yeah, well, the first guy is gone. The sort of second tier of the people who could have replaced him are gone. The third tier are gone because we hit them." So yeah, so we don't know who might be left, and it is entirely possible that we end up with people who are even worse, which was an interesting thing to recognize a few days into this operation as
Yeah,
opposed to
sort
at
of,
the
it
outset.
seems like the kind of thing maybe you should talk about before the operation.
Correct. And listen, I know we've had a massive workforce hollowing out of the workforce over the past year and change, but I know there are still people in government in the IC who know these things, heck, who can answer these questions, and it baffles me that we're just finding out that these are questions we should be asking, that the administration is finding out these are questions they should be asking instead of, getting that information at the outset. But anyway, to answer your question, to me, that suggests that Israel is, at least Israel, I don't know if that is a shared perspective in the administration, in our administration. But it seems to me that, at least for Israel, the goal is to get rid of the regime entirely, not simply steer in a direction that is more acceptable from its perspective, right? I guess with the view that, look, the regime is weak, we are here, right? Like, we've started doing this operation, why not just finish the job instead of kind of trying to have a friendlier face in the regime, and then have to kind of do this again if it doesn't work out. And the question is whether they see somebody, potentially Reza Pahlavi, the crown prince, for example, as a viable alternative. Because if you don't have a viable alternative, why would you go down that list of individuals, right? So I think they're much more. It seems to me that at least Israel is much more forward-leaning in terms of regime change than maybe the administration is. Again, I think the administration is just confused as to what they're actually trying to achieve here.
Yeah, so I am sympathetic to the idea of a forward-leaning approach to regime change if you had any sense of where it was going, right? Um, but it does seem to me that, like, there is nothing redeemable about this regime, and so if you can annihilate it from the face of the earth, that would be a good thing, provided that what you are replacing it with, you are confident is not something. It's hard to imagine something worse, but it's not hard to imagine something more chaotic or less controlled. And the Israelis traditionally have been pretty cautious about that sort of thing, most recently in Syria, where they were not actually excited about getting rid of the Assad regime and have been, granted, the subsequent regime is a complicated animal from their point of view, but they've been pretty hostile to it. And so I guess my question is why, all right, Iran isn't on their border, and Syria is relatively small, and Iran is giant, and um, but it still seems to me that the logic of it would favor the other direction, a kind of devil um, particularly a devil that you have so completely penetrated from an intelligence point of view. Do we have any sense of um, why they are so bullish on the idea of burn the whole thing down and see what happens?
I don't know the answer to that. One thing that might, I think, shape the perception there is sort of similar to what we've said about the administration and Venezuela and Midnight Hammer, which was the operation that we did over the summer targeting Iran's nuclear program. And I think there's a parallel here, which is that there's these operational successes that we've had, right? That the Trump administration has had, that maybe have led it to believe that that it can also achieve these strategic objectives. And I think you're maybe seeing something similar, that confidence in Israel, where since October 7th, it has been extremely successful operationally at degrading Iran's, proxy network, going after Hezbollah, the chief proxy that Iran has, after Iran's missile program earlier, and also, by the way, going after the leadership a while ago. So, it has been, as you noted, Israel has had really incredible penetration into the Iranian military apparatus and has really been able to kind of take care of a lot of their capabilities. So I wonder if part of it is not the sense of confidence that, all right, we've managed to blow up Hezbollah. We managed to blow up the proxy network, done a ton of damage to the nuclear program, done a ton of damage to the missile program. Why not just go and finish the job and kind of make these smaller operational successes into a big strategic victory? Obviously, TBD, we'll see where that leads, but I think that might be part of what we're seeing. You would have to ask a question to people who understand Israel's domestic politics and, who've studied Prime Minister Netanyahu longer than I have, in terms of what else might be going on. I don't want to kind of opine on that too much, but I think that is part of the calculation there.
I mean, I do think, as somebody who spends a lot of time with Israeli politics, I do think that is 90% of the explanation. I also think that a small percent of the explanation is that Bibi is heading into elections this year, and he has recovered surprisingly well from the catastrophe of October 7th politically, and finishing off the Iranian leadership would be a hell of a feather in that, you know, I don't know, cap, or if you could say, um, well, October 7th, wasn't my fault, and anyway, I decapitated Hezbollah, destroyed Hamas, uh, um, uh, the Syrian regime fell because of our actions, and we took out the Iranian threat. I mean, that's actually not a terrible case. Um, I don't know that leaving a governance wasteland in a country of 90 million people is the, like, puts the best face forward on that. But look, there's no doubt that they've been enormously operationally successful, and if you ignore the fact that they're raining missiles down on Israel, and that everybody's in shelters, Israel has come out of this extremely strong, and when the missiles stop, and they will stop, um, Israel is has done very well in this environment. And my enthusiasm for Bibi Netanyahu is completely under control, but he actually does get a certain amount of credit for that. He's been very clever about playing a lot of cards, and he's had a lot of cards to play, and he's played them very well. And I think um, uh, that said, I don't think it is a good thing for Israel to have a Libya-like outcome in Iran. And there are Iran is too close. It is too uh, engaged with too many of Israel's immediate neighbors. It is factions of it, including the governing one right now, and for the last 40 years, are too committed to Israel as an enemy. I mean, it is a hell of a fire to play with.
I also think there's one more maybe piece to it, which is that, it kind of goes back to what we're talking about with Trump coming out of Venezuela, coming out of Midnight Hammer, having this kind of confidence, right? It was clear, even with everything going around Greenland and, everything we're seeing in the Caribbean, it was very clear that Trump was seeing the use of force as something that he could do well, he could do easily at a low cost. All of those things are not necessarily true, but I think that was sort of the way he perceived that. At least that's how he kind of characterized it publicly. And so if you're Bibi and you have elections to worry about, and you are, you've spent your entire career kind of, portraying yourself as the security guy, right? You have this
And
opportunity
specifically the
maybe,
security guy vis-a-vis Iran.
and specifically the security guys vis-a-vis Iran, and specifically vis-a-vis Iran's nuclear program, then you maybe have an opportunity to bring Trump along now before, we're sufficiently before the midterms, and we're right, he's riding high after these operational successes, and no other president in recent memory would have been okay doing what he's
Right.
doing, right? So maybe there is also, I don't want to kind of, do too much of a criminology here, but I think there's maybe a window of opportunity that Bibi saw that he wanted to seize that would not have been available to him as we get closer to the midterms, and so on and so forth.
The problem for Bibi is that, like with Gaza. He has absolutely no vision of an end state. And he's unlike the hardest of the hard right in his own government in this regard. If you ask Smotrich what's the vision, he'll just tell you, clear out those pesky Palestinians, build, Trump's resort. There is an answer to this question on the farthest of the far right. But for Bibi, there's no answer to this question. And so you end up with a vision of how to fight and then no vision of what comes after. And that was a problem with the Gaza operation from day one. And it remains after the operation, you know, absolutely no end state vision. And it allows both the farthest of the far right to sort of inject vision into things, but it also allows crazy schemes like having, an American startup organization run food distribution, right? Because you have no sense yourself of what you're doing. And then, and I worry about that on a grand scale here, right? That you can take out this regime. You have the tactical capacity, the intelligence penetration, uh, you know, you've been studying this problem for 25 years. You know where all the targets are. Half of the IRGC generals secretly work for you, as they're now arresting each other, because they're all Israeli agents. Um, and but then what? And it's not like you could really create this is not a small state. It's not a Syria situation, which is bad a fucking enough. Um, you know, um, I don't know. I am hopeful because anytime you destroy statues of Ramses II and lay them waste in the desert, you should be hopeful. But I'm really worried about it. I do not understand what they're like. I would like to think that somebody has an idea of what they're trying to achieve here.
And the challenge too, right, is that part of what having a combined operation with a partner entails is precisely to ask these questions and to kind of make sure that the blinders that they have, you're kind of able to shed light on those things and pose those questions. And, when I was in government, we worked with the Israelis at DoD. Part of it was they would push back on things, we would push back on things, and that helped both sides kind of refine their thinking and and all of those things. And it doesn't seem like that's what's going on now. What it seems like is happening is that we're just saying, sure, you seem like what you're doing, let's go, we'll just
Right.
yeah, sure. And that is not ideal. It's not conducive to, again, to the point of, apparently we are now 3, 4, however many days in, and people are just starting to ask questions to the effect of, do we need to take out American citizens from the region? How do we do that? What does that entail? Things like, oh wait, they're starting to shoot at energy infrastructure. We didn't think that was going to happen. Like, all of these were knowable no's. All of these things are things that not only were predictable, they were predicted for years that these are the things that
Right.
would be happening. And the, president's comment that, well, things are going too fast, it's not good enough. Like, yeah, of course they're going to go very fast. That is how conflict normally goes. That's why you have to do the work of doing the planning. And if you're going to be doing this with Israel, you need to be doing that work together at the outset to make sure that you're answering the right questions, and and checking each other and pushing back on things that don't make sense. And it just doesn't seem like either party was doing that. It was just kind of like, we got this, let's go. And now we're figuring out that there are issues that we should be addressing.
So I'm I'm kind of interested here in what the bad scenarios are, and I want to float a devious idea that the bad scenarios are sufficiently down the road that you cannot care. Now, that's harder if you're BB because the bad scenarios are nearby. But from Trump's point of view, if you blow up a bunch of stuff and kill a bunch of people and Iran descends into chaos, but it's chaos without a functioning nuclear program and it's not projecting force overseas because it's struggling to maintain itself, and its proxies start to wither and die, or in the case of the Iraqi ones, just become organized crime gangs, which is a lot of what they are anyway. Um, what's the problem? I mean, I know what I think the problem is, which is that a huge number of people are going to die and live in lawless territories. But why isn't that a we neutralized a threat outcome and we gave them a chance to, you know, trim the sails and have a great deal, and they didn't take it up, and that's not our problem. So now it's an immigration problem. Just keep them out.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is the problem from the perspective of the United States. I don't know what that looks like from the perspective of the president and how much of that will factor in for him, right? The problem beyond people in Iran will die, people in the region are getting targeted or spending their life in bunkers, and by the way, are might die as well, is you're going to have energy prices, oil prices are going to keep going up. Um, from the perspective of US allies, there was reporting today about missile. Well, apparently there was some sort of missile attack against Turkey. I don't know how. I haven't seen the latest on that and what that actually looks like. But clearly, allies and partners are getting targeted in the region. Um, Turkey, NATO ally, there is an Article 5 situation. If things keep escalating, that is going to have implications for the United States. There's the whole bucket of obviously can of worms with NATO that we can talk about, and how this conflict is also is adding to the fracturing of NATO. You saw France, the president of France came out and criticized and said that the attacks were illegal under international law. There is this tension that now is brewing between the US and Spain because Spain doesn't like what we're doing, and Trump said, well, tough. Number one, we're going to use your bases even if you tell us not to, and two, we're going to stop doing trade with you. So, we're already in a situation where after Greenland, after everything else, NATO is on a downward trajectory, and none of this is helping alliance cohesion, right? So there is that piece of it. By the way, the Japanese and other US allies in Asia are also going to have interest, and they're going to care. So this is going to affect a lot of different countries. I haven't even started talking about migration and what that looks like. If the situation gets more chaotic in Iran, all of a sudden you're going to have hundreds of thousands, millions of people escaping, trying to go to neighboring countries, Europe, etc. So, there's going to be ripple effects that are going to happen. The question I have is how much of that actually factors in for the president? Because as you said, it might be that he just kind of thinks of it as, well, politically, I took care of the nuclear program and I can go and say that on the campaign trail. If he returns to the campaign trail, and so what if all of these things are happening?
Um, all right, so we are going to be joined shortly by Nastya, who has questions about U.S. law enforcement. And so we're going to have a change of subject in about 5 minutes. So uh, Yes, John Hawkinson, we are going to have outro music. And I promise. Um, uh, so if people have questions for Ari, this is the time to do it. Um, and What are you looking for over the next few days? What would be the sign of increased or decreased coherence in US or Israeli policy? What like it all seems like a bit of a blur to me.
It is a bit of a blur to me too. I was going to say one more thing that I forgot to mention, which is that the thing that actually the president should really care about is potential homeland threats that are going to come out of this, right? Terrorism threats, assassination, so on and so forth. By the way, apparently we've dismantled the team at the FBI who did a lot of this work, so really not great. So that is something I'm going to be looking for is, partly is going to be what response continues to unfold in Iran. On the US side and on the Israeli side, I will keep watching the target sets because that will tell us whether we're kind of expanding or if we're going to start narrowing down a little bit. It seems like the former right now, but we'll see. I guess the big thing is going to be the messaging and whether we continue to see this very confused messaging from different corners of the administration, or if they actually manage to settle on one single message. Right now, they can't even do that. So we'll see. We'll see if they manage to settle on a single coherent message. I think we'll know that maybe we're starting to be on the right path here.
One last question before I let you go is uh, it seems like there have been large protests um, and celebrations of the death of the supreme leader, and there have not been mass killings in response. Do you read that as the regime showing restraint, or do you read that as the regime being overwhelmed, or is it something else? How should we understand the internal politics of Iran in this context?
I think it's a bit too early to say because as you know, we wrap up here, they could start killing people, right? Like you don't know we won't know 100% until we're kind of a bit further along. I think part of it is that they're either overwhelmed or they feel like the domestic situation is under control. Because again, remember that they did just kill many thousands of people, and so they might feel like they have sufficiently regained control over the domestic situation. They need to just focus externally. But again, I don't want to speak too soon because we don't know what's going to happen in the days and weeks that will follow here.
All right, I will just say we do have viewers in Tehran, at least a few of them that I know about. We are thinking about you guys, and stay safe and be in touch through the comments, through direct messages, or any way that you think is safe for you to do. If you can get to this, I don't know that there are that dog shirt TV is available in Iran right now, but we're thinking about you guys. All right, Ari, feel free to hang around or drop off as you like. There is a great enthusiasm for your presentation. And Nastya, we have to wrap about 5 minutes early today, so that leaves us about 10 minutes to talk about criminal justice authorities in the United States, about which you had some questions.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
We hear you just fine.
Great. So my question was about and I mean, I've already asked AI about it, but I need a better, I always prefer human to the AI.
You actually prefer organic intelligence?
I do.
Well, let's see. So which AI did you ask? And we're going to compare my answer to that, the AI's answer, and we're going to see. And Kate should join too, because she has. I'm sure she will have thoughts on this.
I asked Claude because in light of recent news, I feel like I need to use Claude to support them. So
Oh, okay.
I'm
So
thinking of switching to Claude from Gemini.
I see. Okay. So what's the question?
So the
We're going to see
question,
how I do relative to Claude.
so the question is, I was wondering which law enforcement agencies in the US have the technical capabilities to intercept and track phone calls, and sort of what's the process for that? Like, what are the rights of the agencies to do that, and which agencies have the technical capability? And I'm asking that question because in Ukraine, only one agency has the technical capability to do that. And all other agencies that want to do that have to go through that agency, the SBU, the State Security Service. And in Ukraine, you have to obtain a court warrant and then go ask the SBU to do it for you, which presents a lot of challenges.
And are we talking about in domestic phone
live
calls?
domestic live listening into somebody talking?
And what about and it's so it's domestic and it's for criminal reasons, not for national security reasons.
Sure, for criminal reasons, yes.
Okay. So the answer to this question, first of all, is that most intercepted communication are not intercepted by wiretap. That's an archaic understanding of the technical means by which people do it.
What do you mean by that?
So
I don't understand the technological side of this.
Right. So let's start with the technological side because it bears on the what you're asking is an authorities and capabilities question, but start with the technical side. So for example, what we are doing now is not a telephone call. And to intercept it does not require a wiretap. It requires a link to go on to Dogshirt TV's Riverside, right? You could also simply approach Riverside and say, hey, we demand access to this, right? If this were a constrained thing. Most communications are intercepted not by somebody clipping alligator clips to telephone wires, but by demands to companies that have access to the information.
So that includes like WhatsApp, Signal, all of that.
Well, so Signal can't provide it because of the nature of Signal's technology. What you'll get is scrambled. But mostly these things are done by demands to the companies that are hosting the communications. Now that is a complicated proposition because the technologies are complicated, but and the answer to the question who has the authority to make those demands is any law enforcement authority with the power to investigate something under the Stored Communications Act or under Title III or under has the authority to make what are essentially production demands. Now, the wrinkle arises in a few contexts. One is, what is the showing that you need to make in order to force the company to? So it's mostly not a technical capabilities question. It's mostly a legal authorities question.
But what about wiretapping, like actual phone call?
We're getting to wiretapping in a minute. But most of what you think of as wiretapping is not wiretapping anymore. It's production demands to companies. So as a technical, as a legal matter, most of this stuff is done by production demands, not by technical interception. And it is done depending on the nature of the interception. It is done either with somebody's consent. So, if you're looking for a bad guy who's doing online child porn, right? You get somebody on the other end of it to cooperate, right? Or it is done by demand to the organization. Now, when you present the organization with a demand, there's a legal process you have to go through to get that demand. And that involves, generally speaking, depending on the type of material you're going after, if it's content material, it requires a warrant and going to a court, getting that warrant. Now, there are situations in which you're doing what's effectively a wiretap. It's not done anymore with alligator clips. It's again done.
I don't know about the alligator clips. I know about some mysterious black box that's.
Yeah, so you're too young to know about the alligator clips. They go like this, and you put them on the wire. And so the answer is these are done in routing stations at the service provider level. So you go to Verizon or AT&T and you say, we want to go up on Nastia's line. And here's the information about the line. And they will provide the, so the answer to the question, who has the technical capability to do the interception, is the interception itself. Lots of organizations have it because they're going through the service provider. Now, the wrinkle is, okay, now you've intercepted Nastia's communications, but they're all encrypted because she has good consumer electronics hygiene. And so she's she's using WhatsApp, she's using Signal, she's using, some encrypted system. That is the question that you get into much more elite law enforcement agencies. So your average police department may have the ability to demand production of Nastia's, what's coming in and out of Nastia's phone, but interpreting it is something that requires a much more capable lab. And in this regard, the FBI is the premier agency. They have more capabilities. And they also have the ability, they have certain cooperative agreements with the National Security Agency, which doesn't do criminal investigations, but sometimes helps both with interceptions and with processing.
Okay, so, but I feel like I'm now more confused than I was before this.
Well, so is this
I think Claude is winning.
is this the answer that Claude gave you?
No, I'm confused.
Who's smarter,
because
Ben or Claude?
obviously Ben, but
Not sure that's right.
the question is, depends on what your definition of smart is. But the question is, so you say I'm just like now more confused about how the interception process even works, because you said that agencies just go and ask the provider. But then what is the technical capability that I'm talking about?
So the technical capability that you're talking about, so again, it is mostly at this stage for a garden variety wiretap. It is mostly not a technical capability.
Okay, but what's the part that is?
Well, so if
like when NABU goes and says we don't have the technical capability to intercept something and the DSBU does, what are they talking about?
So I don't know how Ukrainian wiretaps work. But
wasn't it the same thing everywhere?
If for a routine phone in the United States, there is no the black box that you're referring to is an office in
Russia has a
routing,
black box.
is an office in a routing station in
Interesting.
at your provider's office.
So we have different systems for this.
Well,
Clearly.
I don't know what they may mean, as Kate is saying, and Kate is former FBI, is that they might not have the authority to do a wiretap.
No, they do, because they specifically talk about technical capabilities. It's like both in Ukrainian and in English. It's specifically like they don't have some sort of equipment kind of thing.
So I don't know what that means.
Okay.
Because here, there is like the communications are digital. And the companies can isolate the stream, and the companies provide that stream to law enforcement on demand. Now, there are certain things that go in and out of your phone that don't work that way, and that may require, for example, if there is a warrant for what's stored on your phone, that is a different matter.
Mm-hmm.
But for the income, for the stuff that goes in and out of your phone, that is that is providable by the service provider. All right, we got to wrap, and I want John to appreciate that we are having outro music. And it is Vera Lynn singing We'll Meet Again, 1943.
We'll meet again. Don't know where, don't know where.